You don't trust me, do you? You never have. Not really. You never saw me as a man. Just some obligation you carried too long. I had no words for that. Only silence. And he took that silence as guilt, as confirmation. Belle didn't help. She had always been polite in that plastic, brittle way some women adopt when they can't be bothered to hide their contempt fully. She hugged with her chin held high, complimented my cooking like it was an act of charity, and treated my presence in the house like an aesthetic flaw she couldn't quite erase. But once the question of the land became public knowledge, when Grayson began complaining to her that I held the reins too tightly, her disdain crystallized into a narrative. She became the storyteller, and I was cast as her villain, a controlling, outdated matriarch standing in the way of their progress. I overheard her on the phone one afternoon, her voice loud and careless from the next room, assuming I was out back tending the garden. She lives for control, she said. She hoards property and trauma like old people hoard pills. She's the mildew under our wallpaper. We try to live a modern life, and she's in the background with her dusty little apron and those judgmental eyes. Like a bad smell we can't clean out. That was the day I stopped baking for them the cinnamon rolls, the pies, the small acts of love that had once filled the house with warmth. That was the day I realized I was no longer the quiet foundation they built upon. I had become the crack in the wall they wanted to plaster over, to hide from view. Friends of hers started treating me like a tenant in my own home. They would come for dinner parties and greet me with condescending smiles. "Oh, hi Delilah. Still here. How cute." One of them called me a legacy decoration right to my face, thinking I wouldn't understand the phrase or its insult. Belle laughed, a sharp bark that echoed. The worst part, Grayson said nothing. Even when he heard them, even when I stood right there, he never corrected them, never told them to stop. Because deep down, I think he believed it too, that I was an embarrassment, a relic from a bygone era, a mistake they couldn't quite dispose of because it would look bad on paper, tarnish their image. It wasn't just about the land. It was never solely about the land. It was about the idea that I still held power they hadn't been granted, that I still mattered in a way that complicated their picture-perfect existence. And Belle? She was always more interested in pictures than people. Our house became her showroom. Every piece of furniture curated for Instagram. Every redecoration a hashtag opportunity. She posted videos of redecorating the old woman's room without ever uttering my name, as if I were a ghost haunting the space. She changed the wallpaper in the hallway and called it detoxifying the energy. She had the audacity to hang a large, framed photo of her own mother in the living room, glowing and prominent, after tucking away the only picture I had of Thomas and me, our wedding day, smiles frozen in time. When I asked where it had gone, she shrugged. Oh, it clashed just like that. My memories were removed from the walls of my own home, relegated to storage like outdated decor. Over time, they stopped inviting me to their dinners, hosted parties without mentioning them to me, laughed in rooms where I was no longer welcome. I became the sound of slippers shuffling down the hallway, a door opening and closing too softly to matter. I was disappearing in increments, piece by piece. And every time I tried to speak up, to push back against the erosion, I was labeled difficult, dramatic, too emotional for their rational world. Belle told her friends I was rebranding victimhood as senior citizenship, that I was performing elderliness for sympathy points, that my vibe was outdated and depressing. In their story, I had become the mother no one wanted to remember, and that made it easier for them to forget they had loved me once by convincing themselves I was never truly lovable to begin with. But I remembered everything, the good, the bad, the moments that shaped us. And now, sitting in that motel room alone, with the heater rattling ineffectually beside me against the chill, I knew that if they had rewritten my story, it was time I authored an ending of my own. One that didn't ask for permission, one that didn't wait for kindness that would never come. Because if they wanted me erased, they would have to learn what it meant to be written out themselves. To face the blank page of consequences, the camera was the size of a coat button, discreetly tucked into the corner of the bookshelf in the hallway outside my room, a small, unassuming device that blended seamlessly with the wood grain. I had bought it online, paid in cash at the local pharmacy to avoid any trace, and installed it myself with trembling hands, following the instructions meticulously. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't need their permission. What I needed was proof, a safeguard in a world where words could be twisted and memories denied. I had never imagined reaching a point in life where surveillance felt like safety. But when silence becomes a strategy of exclusion, evidence becomes your only protection. It started with small things going missing: my sewing scissors, sharp and reliable after decades of use, a necklace Thomas had given me on our 10th anniversary, a simple gold chain with a locket holding his photo, a box of letters I had written but never sent, private thoughts poured onto paper. Then came the locked pantry, the new labels on food containers reading for household use only, as if I were a stranger pilfering from their stores. The way Belle spoke to me shifted to like I was an employee who had overstayed her welcome, a lingering odor they couldn't scrub from the curtains. Grayson never said much directly, but his silence wasn't neutral. It was agreement worn like a mask, complicit in every slight. And when I once mentioned feeling unsafe in my own home, his only response was a dismissive, "Maybe you're just too sensitive for the way the world is now." So I stopped talking openly. I started watching, observing from the shadows I had been pushed into. The camera had been running for months, capturing snippets of footage in grainy black and white, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. I rarely reviewed it, just enough to keep the battery charged and swap the memory card periodically. It wasn't until the week after they locked me out of my own home, after that humiliating night in the rain, that I sat in the motel room with a cup of weak, lukewarm coffee and watched the clips in sequence, piecing together the puzzle of my erasure. I didn't expect what I found. Halloween night. Belle had hosted a party, not surprising given her love for curated chaos and social spectacles. But I hadn't known about this one. They had told me they were visiting friends that weekend, a convenient excuse to exclude me. I had gone to bed early with a sore hip, the house seemingly empty when I awoke briefly in the night. But there it was on the footage, October 31st, the hallway filling with unfamiliar laughter, high heels clicking across the hardwood floors like judgmental taps, voices shouting from the living room, music pulsing faintly in the background. I fast-forwarded through the mundane rivals, then paused when I saw her, Belle, wearing a gray curly wig that mimicked my hair, a long beige cardigan I recognized as one of mine stolen from my closet. No doubt, a plastic oxygen tube looped clumsily around her ears and into her nose. A crude prop. She walked with an exaggerated hunch, one arm bent at an awkward angle, the other dragging a cane that was really a broomstick wrapped in tinfoil for effect. She shuffled into view, muttering nonsense in a fake, quivering voice. "Oh dear, where did I put my pills? Grayson, did you take my heating pad again? This room smells like mortality." The crowd behind her howled with laughter, their guffaws echoing through the speakers like daggers. And then Grayson appeared on screen, my son, holding his phone up to record her, smiling. No, beaming with pride at the spectacle. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced theatrically, "Delilah the mummy still won't die." Belle shrieked with joy, twirled around in her mockery, pretended to cough violently into a tissue, then dropped it on the floor with a flourish. "I used to be respected," she yelled in her exaggerated imitation. "Now I'm just mold in a cardigan," someone off camera shouted. "More like passive-aggressive taxidermy." Grayson laughed so hard he doubled over, clutching his sides, the camera shaking in his hand. The video clip ended there, but the damage lingered. I stared at the laptop screen for a long time, the image frozen on their gleeful faces. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I simply reached over to my bag, pulled out a blank DVD from the pocket of my coat, and burned the footage onto it with methodical precision. I labeled it in neat handwriting, October 31st, hallway camera, 8:42 p.m. Then I slipped it into a slim plastic case and called the only person in town I still trusted, Eloise. Say Garner, my neighbor of 30 years, a woman with a sharp mind and a kinder heart. She picked up on the second ring, her voice warm and crisp like autumn leaves underfoot. Delilah, sweetheart, what's going on? I asked if she could meet me discreetly. No questions yet. She said yes without hesitation. We met at the church garden the next morning, a quiet spot empty except for two crows perched on the bench where we sat, their black feathers glistening in the weak sunlight. I handed her the disc and said, if anything happens to me, this is why. She looked me dead in the eye, her gaze steady. They don't know who they're playing with, do they? I smiled, but it didn't reach my cheeks, remaining a tight line. No, I said,